If I'm holding on to the past, wishing it were different, I'm still hurting inside, no matter how much I try to convince myself that I'm beyond it. The only option is to deal with my emotions. It takes courage to deal with my emotions. That's why I'd often rather forget about it. I think my life is okay. I'll just focus on day-to-day living. I distract myself with other more pressing things. I keep busy. I keep my head above water. But something still feels like it's trying to pull me down. The effort of treading water is constant, and it can eventually become exhausting, or it can lead me to addiction or anger or negative behavior. Though time does heal, it's often not enough. What is missing is a gentle, direct way to deal with my emotions. When my mind is stressed, it's not gentle. So every time I touch the old subject, I hurt myself with it. No wonder I try to avoid it. No wonder I don't want to deal with it. There's nothing worse than stepping into quicksand. It is actually intelligent to avoid it. And emotions can be a kind of quicksand if you don't know how to handle them. But unfortunately, avoiding it doesn't make it go away. And I have to spend my life now avoiding certain areas of my thinking. In fact, as more stress accumulates, my navigable area of thinking becomes smaller and smaller. Can't go over there. Oh, I can't go there. Can't think about that person. Can't think about that person. Oh, that situation. Don't go there. Like I've just become smaller and smaller. So there needs to be a way to safely and effectively deal with my emotions. Here's what I use. Since 2007, I've been using the Work of Byron Katie, sometimes called the Work, as a way to question stressful thoughts and to actually turn them around. This meditative practice involves writing down my stressful thoughts. Just this act alone is therapeutic for me. Instead of swirling in a pool of negativity in my mind, I've identified some concrete thoughts that I'm believing at the center of the negativity. And when I write them down, I actually get a little more distance on them. I get a little more of a handle on them. And this helps a lot. The next part of the work is to question what I wrote down. This takes it to a whole new level. This is not about trying to change my mind. This is about truly questioning myself. I want to be open to what's really true inside of me. Maybe my thought really is true. Maybe it's not true. I want to find out. And how do I react when I believe that thought is true? How does it affect my life? And who would I be if I wasn't so attached to that thought, if I wasn't believing that thought? This is inquiry. This is exploring. These questions make me go, and the questions support me to look a little more closely at what I was calling quicksand. And when I do, I often find that there's solid ground in there. What was just swirling emotions with no bottom starts to actually have some kind of solidity, some place where I can move around, some way of looking at it, some way of exploring, some way out even. So this allows me to step into the quicksand and explore in a way that is not fearful, doesn't feel dangerous, doesn't feel scary. It takes some courage, but actually I feel at home as I'm exploring even old stressful emotions. Which brings me to the final phase of doing the work, finding the turnarounds and examples of how the turnarounds could be true. This is actually radical work. It turns my world inside out and upside down. So what I thought was scary, what I thought was terrible, what I thought was super stressful, I often find out is completely benign or wasn't what I thought it was at all. And this is a fascinating path of discovery. But it's a process. Little by little, thought by thought, I question what I believe, and a new understanding often emerges. But even when I know how to do this work, I sometimes still put it off. To not deal with my emotions sometimes feels easier. And so I let the quicksand sort of stay off to the side. and the tool of the work of Byron Katie sits unused, I don't apply it. And so as a result, I continue feeling the heaviness of not having dealt with something. Deciding to deal with my emotions. For me, I have to have a few things in place before I can actually start to deal with my emotions in this way. First of all, I have to have a working knowledge and trust of this process, the work. This has come over time, and I really do trust it. It's the reason I trust it is because it brings me back to myself every time, and it gets me to ask myself what is true, and it's not trying to push any agenda. So, but you have to know how it works. You have to understand a little bit the mechanics of this process, and that comes with a little practice. Secondly, I have to have some dissatisfaction with my current state of emotions. If everything is going great, why question everything? So that's usually not hard to find for most of us. And then finally, I have to have a willingness to put in some time to do the work. You can't just kind of wave your hand at it. This is a contemplative process. It takes some space. You have to kind of create a safe space for it and set up some kind of routine, ideally, where you're doing it on an ongoing basis because it deepens over time, it matures over time, and layers upon layers get addressed so that you end up experiencing more and more clarity over time. Recently, I started doing the work on my parents' divorce from when I was 15. This was one of the biggest traumas of my life. And while I've done a lot of the work, I haven't done a lot of the work on the divorce. And I can tell you, after just a few days of questioning my thoughts about the divorce, I'm feeling already much lighter. The process of letting go takes time, but it begins from the beginning. It begins right from the start. So what I'm actually doing now, years later, is I'm actually going through the grieving process that I had tabled and pushed aside and said, oh, that's too much for me, and not dealt with. Now I'm actually starting to step into it with this tool of the work of Byron Katie and allowing myself to, in a very gradual way, deal with the stuff that I was not wanting to look at. The work actually makes grieving easier for me. I did the work every day for 2 months after my mom died, and in that time I worked through my grief quite effectively. I found my peace. And now I'm opening this cold case of my parents' divorce. And for me, the divorce was the death of my family. That was the way I took it at age 15, and I think some part of me is still holding that. I never gave myself the same amount of time doing the work on the divorce as I did on my mom's death. So now the time has come, and it feels so healing to start to step into that and to not just step in blind, not just step in with no tools, but to come with this process and experience using this process so that I can truly digest the experiences that I had. I'll continue to work on this until I deal with my emotions completely or until I'm ready to move to something else. I really love having this tool of the work of Byron Katie, which is so effective for me. If you want to learn how to do the work and start using it on a regular basis to deal with your emotions, I invite you to participate in my online course called The Work 101. And I designed this course especially for anyone that wants to deal with their emotions and maybe doesn't know how to deal with them. We start very simply, very comfortably. We learn the process and we support each other in a community to go deeply into the process of dealing with emotions. So I'll end with a quote from Byron Katie from her book called Question Your Thinking, Change the World. The thing you're terrified of losing, you've already lost it. You may not have noticed that yet, and it may take you a while to grieve. And then you may realize that there was never anything to lose.